chick flicks, romantic comedies, rom-coms. You love them, you hate them, but we are here to eviscerate them. Welcome to the RomCom Killjoys podcast. I'm your host, Jonelle Walker. Now, let's get on with some feminist joy killing. Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's episode 12, and I have decided that since we are entering we're on the precipice of our teen years, our teen days here at RomCom Killjoys, it's the appropriate time for us to have a very special teen edition of RomCom Killjoys, our very first high school rom-com. And who better to discuss such a topic than a friend of mine who I often referred to as RomCom when we met back in college, Ramya Anbalagan. Ramya, will you introduce yourself to the people?
Oh, my name is Ramya, and yes, my nickname is RomCom. Very fitting because I eat up rom-coms so easily, and it is one of my favorite genres. But I mean, I will admit that a lot of them have flaws.
Oh boy, do they ever. And the one we're talking about today kind of infamously has flaws. It is the trope namer for so many high school rom-com conventions that it's kind of scary. And in fact, I actually watched this after having already seen a little parody film, you might have heard of it, called Not Another Teen Movie.
Yes, yes.
And it is basically a shot-for-shot parody of this film, so it's very difficult for me to take this movie seriously on any level. But was that the case for you, Rami, or did you see this like pure?
Not when it first came out. I think I was pretty young, but obviously years later, it'd always be on like TBS or like all these like certain TV channels that will just like replay this type of these 90s movies. And I did watch Not Another Teen Movie when I was in high school. And oh my god, it like killed me because I was like, oh my god, literally all my thoughts into one movie. That's even worse than the other movie. And so I'm just like watching Not Another Teen Movie and just see it poke all the holes in She's All That. You're just like, wow, man, wow.
Yeah, it really takes a machine gun to this movie in a way that I love deeply. Yes, which is all to say that the film we're talking about today, She's All That, the year of our Lord, 1999, is, as the kids might say, ubiquitous as heck. It's fucking everywhere. So let's get into it. Here is the description from Google. High school hotshot Zach Seiler, played by Freddie Prinze Jr., we stan, is the envy of his peers. But his popularity declines sharply when his cheerleader girlfriend, Taylor, Jodie Lynn O'Keefe, leaves him for sleazy reality television star Brock Hudson, played by Matthew Lillard. Desperate to revive his fading reputation, Seiler agrees to a seemingly impossible challenge. He has 6 weeks to gain the trust of a nerdy outcast, Lainey Boggs, played by Rachel Lee Cook, and help her become the school's next prom queen. Well, Ramya, so that's what Google says this movie's about. But when we really get down to it, what is this movie really about?
I feel like, so rewatching it, very like as of like 10, 15 minutes ago, I was like, oh, this is the ugly duckling, but personified in high school. And just adding all the high school stereotypes, but also kind of implicating that girls need to become hot in order to get through life. And that's where my problem lies, is the having the girl to be hot, and that's like what you need to aim for.
Right, because it's interesting that the film itself kind of leads us to believe through various like small moments, including Freddie Prinze Jr.'s sister, Mac, played by the absolutely incredible Anna Paquin, as a babe, as a wee babe, tweezing Lainey's eyebrows, etc. We're led to believe that Lainey's like not attractive, but it's funny because I wrote in my notes that Zach, when he first is confronted with the prospect of making her over, he doesn't talk about her being ugly. He says she's scary and inaccessible.
Yes, that was such an interesting line. I feel like I never noticed that before. So yeah, that was literally...
Me neither.
Well, one, there's also all these issues of them, one, having to pick a girl, and then two, saying, like, they were showing a girl picking a wedgie, they were showing a girl, like, just whining to a friend, and I'm like, is that really a issue why you can't make her over? And then, yes, Lainey comes by, and he's like, no, too scary and inaccessible. And I was like, what? Loaded words that I'm like, oh, okay, do you know her this well or something? I'm not aware of this.
Right. I sort of had the same question. And then I also wondered, well, if the problem with Lainey that makes her the like last person that Zach wants to try and make over to be prom queen, her problem is that she's scary and inaccessible. It's kind of funny because then he proceeds to like make her over physically and doesn't try to change the fact that she's scary and inaccessible, which seems to be the thing that he's attracted to in the end. Question mark?
Yeah. Whoa, I didn't even think like that. Like, I didn't even think about the fact that, yeah, like, at the end of it, like, she's still who she is, but did she just have to become pretty for you to be okay with that? Because then that's also a bunch of other problems right there, where it's like, okay, that's not how healthy relationships should work.
Well, no kidding. And it definitely feels like it's kind of this study in high school dating anthropology where, like, what does hotness even mean in this context? Like, what did you take away as the values of hotness, not only in A, high school, but B, as we have discussed prior to starting this recording, the most 1999 high school that has ever been rendered on film?
So 1999, like, in the sense of, like, they, like, they bringing up the real world. And I'm like, I knew how big of a hit that was back then. And then, like, somehow they tied that into high school dating. And then on top of it, the way they actually even cut in and out of scenes, like, they were on spring break at a beach party, but then they cut so seamlessly back and forth from high school to spring break. And it's just, like, also just all the stereotypes and all, like, I don't know, like, it's hard because I love this movie so much, actually. Like, I do enjoy watching it. But I'm also like, oh my god, but I'm cringing also half the time.
So let's talk about those stereotypes. Like, when you're talking about all the stereotypes, what are you referring to? I mean, listen, I've got eyes, I can infer, but I would love to hear you say it.
I mean, so you got Taylor Vaughn, typical it girl cheerleader, has everything going on for her, wears the hottest clothes, drives the nicest car, has, like, a group of girls always gaggling around her. You have Paul Walker's character, whose name I'm actually forgetting, but it's just, like...
It's Dean. It's,
Dean.
Like, the most stereotypical hot white boy's name.
Dean Sampson Jr. Yes, that's it.
Oh my god!
Dean Sampson Jr.
Yes.
Just typical douche, typical, like, misogynist douche, where just always looking at a girl's value with her looks. And definitely, of course, we see that at prom too, where he's like, I'm gonna get it in, and literally all the guys were like, no, you're not. And then lo and behold, does he get it in? Nah. But yep, like, stereotypical douche guy. And there's Freddie Prinze Jr., who I very much, like, I love Freddie Prinze Jr. He was the it boy of the 90s, and I'm here for it. I would say for him, his stereotype is just, like, the guy that has it all. And I mean, again, with the 90s, there was a lot of movies, and I'm just going to say it, a lot of white privileged men being the lead of having it all. But their trouble is, they don't know what college to go to. Like, literally, that's their conflict. And so I feel like it's a stereotype of, like, a guy having it all, but, like, still, like, held up on, like, having to make the difficult decision of, like, what other privilege they could have.
Yeah, and of course that's, like, very stark against the fact that they have, like, their one famously token black friend who has, I think, like, 6 lines, and most of them are, yeah, oh no, I don't want to get involved with this.
He has the best line. There is a line in the beginning of the movie where he said, it's to Dean, and he goes, on behalf of all black people, please stop. And it's just,
yes.
And it's, like, just when Dean is just, like, trying to act like he's all cool and shit, and, like, literally he's like, I'm not having this, nah. And that's, like, my favorite line from him. But yes, only has 6 lines. Clearly, like, just the one black friend that they have, and it's the same with the girls. Except in the girls, they have Gabrielle Union and Lil' Kim. But again,
Yes.
not these, like, they were solely supporting characters. And am I surprised for the 90s? No. I very much, like, am seeing change. But of course, yes, there's always that one tokenism, or one or two tokenism friends that you're just kind of like, okay, you just thought you met your quota, great, good to know.
It is sort of like amazing, like you said, in terms of like how the cultural standards of like popularity and attractiveness have all changed in the last 21 years. Because watching that movie, definitely, I kept thinking like, why is Taylor the hot girl in school? Gabrielle Union is right there. What is even happening? This girl is so basic and awful, and Gabrielle Union is right there. Like, what kind of school is this? And also, of course, like, in a 2020 high school, I think Lainey Boggs would be like the cool, inaccessible, hot girl. Right?
Thank you so much for saying that. Like, literally, that's what I was thinking. I was like, you have Gabrielle Union, like, pinnacle woman who, like, just has it, like, I don't even think I have the right words, but it's just, like, such a well-composed human. I'm like, you have her here, and she's, like, not basic, very, like, strategic. Like, you could tell that she really thought, like, her character really thought for herself, and I really appreciated that they brought that layer to her. Like, I like the fact that they kind of switched her from Taylor to Lainey. But yeah, I really 100% would have loved if it was Gabrielle Union being, like, the hot lead girl. I would have loved that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, for Lainey, I would have exactly thought the same thing, where it's like, she's just, like, more to herself, but that, to me, is a different type of cool, where it's, like, quiet, but that's also kind of, that's a kind of different version of sexy that does exist out there.
Definitely. I feel like in the real world, Lainey would have been like the queen of the art boys, like all the like soft boy, like theater boys and art boys, and like even maybe some brand of skater boy would have been just like all over her, like all up in her kibbles and biscuits, like crazy about her. She would have been the alternative hot girl.
The queen of the art boys, I would have loved that storyline. It's also interesting with her. Again, I think this is like right in the beginning of the movie when she's in art class. I like had to stop the movie at one point because it's like these two artsy fartsy girls that went to Spain for their spring break, which is okay, interesting. Like, I didn't think people would do that. But like they told
in high school, like what?
I don't know. Yeah, I was like, first of all, I was really mad they made these girls like bitches to Lainey, even though they're like all taking art. I would hope that there would be like, a way for them to all relate to each other, because clearly you're all in the same art class. But then, two, this line gets me so much. They said that they thought she should just kill herself for her art to work. And I was like, oh my god, what problems I have with this. Because that was like, I feel like the ideas of suicidality obviously are way more intense now and way more taken seriously. But like back then, like, yeah, they just said it so nonchalantly, and I was just like, wait, I'm very struck right now.
Well, and it's so interesting you bring that up, because it prompted me to go and look at the actual release date for this movie. And what's interesting that I hadn't thought about until you said this was that this movie not only was released in like a pre-9/11 world, but it was also released in a pre-Columbine world. This movie was released on January 29th, 1999, and the Columbine shooting was April 20th, 1999, which would, of course, change how Americans thought about high schools and high school social dynamics forever. So it's interesting to think about how, if this movie had been released after Columbine, if those sort of like horrific bullying moments and that invocation of suicidality, and maybe even that scene later in the movie where you have sort of the two alternative boys bullying Lainey's brother, who have sort of what is now, we can recognize, a kind of school shootery vibe to them, if those scenes would be radically different.
Well, that's like so wild. I didn't even think about pre-Columbine. Because that's actually very eerily near each other in the same year. Because they did it right before all that happened, I feel like if they had released it right after, they would have easily had to cut that line. Like, no way would they have been able to keep that. Except I really don't know, if I'm going to be honest, because I feel like only maybe in the past couple, like, I want to say like 5 years, people are being more censored with what content's putting out there in a sense of, like, mentioning guns and mentioning killing yourself and mentioning, like, all these, like, bullying things where I feel like now people are kind of being more aware of it and being like, okay, we're going to cut this scene or we're going to cut this line to be sensitive. Back then, I actually don't know if that would have been a ploy. I feel like sometimes they might be like, oh, we might not even release the movie, but I actually have no clue how they would have handled that back then.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it's similar with the kind of racial dynamics we were talking about before, too, right? Like, there's so many small moments where blackness in particular shows up in this movie that are handled in a way that feels like kind of ancient. Like, this is almost like a time capsule in some ways. Like, the fact that there's a rap battle scene between two characters who we never see before or after this moment, who are essentially like a rapping chorus talking about the, like, I don't know, the epic foibles of Lainey and Taylor's battle for Queen of the Prom, which feels just like so insane now. Like, what a crazy scene to have in a movie.
I love the way you just said that. They're like a chorus. Like, yeah, they play the Greek chorus for literally like not that long in the movie. But I loved it because it was just like a little moment of like beatboxing, two kids rapping, and I was like, but we don't know their names, we don't know where they came from, I don't know how they know Lainey and Taylor at all, but yeah, like I feel like for them, definitely, oh my god, definitely for 1999, like that was a big deal, like that was like a cool thing for them to add in the movie. You could, I feel it, like I feel that was a decision made.
Exactly, like that was their moment where they're like, we're relating to the youths. The youths are rapping in their schools.
We're hip. We're cool. Like, I feel that from producers right now.
It's sort of just like, as you were saying, their invocation of, like, MTV and the real world and, like, all the spring break content that MTV had at the time. Like, that also has that same vibe, don't you think?
Be like, look, like, we know what's up. We know, like, what the kids like nowadays. We get how to relate. And it's like, but do you? Like now, I'm like, did you really know?
Especially because, like, Matthew Lillard's character, this Brock Hudson figure who comes off a reality show and then, like, becomes the boyfriend of Taylor, feels like, now as an adult who's probably older than both of these characters are supposed to be, I look back on this and think, this is bad. This is inappropriate. No?
I think the same thing, because one, I'm also kind of like, I'm kind of, when we first meet him, I was, like, wondering, I was like, why is he here for spring break? Like, what's he doing here? And then, like, they, they do their thing, and then she breaks up with Zach when she comes back to school. And I'm just like, are we not, like, also, did he follow you back home? I'm just, like, very much creeped out about, like, how you guys are making this relationship work. Why are you guys making this relationship work? Like, it was just, I did feel, like, a little creepy vibe of, like, does this guy have a life? Like, I don't understand, like, what he's doing in the meantime when Taylor's at school.
Especially because there's that scene where they're, like, making out or doing some other nefarious activities on a mattress on the floor in what looks like a basement apartment, which I presume is the basement apartment of, like, Taylor's parents. Which makes you go exactly, like, is this guy mooching off of a high schooler?
What it felt like. And then, like, literally when they break up, he's like, you really didn't think I was going to stay with you when I did. What was it? Oh my god, I like want like Road Rules, All-Star, whatever, like All-Star.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? I was like, what are you even talking about? But also, like, where are you just staying with her and we're not aware of it? Like, where are you even at right now? It's like, there's a lot of questioning of, like, I don't even know where this guy lived. I don't even know if this guy had money to suffice, because I can't imagine Road Rules or, like, having, like, all this money to give him to be, like, okay.
And why are none of her girlfriends, Gabrielle Union included, not saying, like, hey, maybe you, 17 to 18-year-old girl, should probably not be shacking up with a former Real World star? Maybe don't.
I just like when she tells Zach about how she met someone, and she's like, Brock Hudson. And he's like, Brock? And then she's like, he's from Real World, LA, season 2.
Exactly.
And he's like the dyslexic, what's it, like, soccer player or volley, something like that. And I was just like, they're Like, how did Zach even know that? He watched The Real World, apparently, also. It's also what I was thinking about. I was like, well, Zach clearly was able to figure out who this guy was.
1999. Everybody was watching MTV. That's the only explanation I have. But wait, speaking of another unexpected Zach thing, can we talk about that performance art scene?
Let's do this. Oddly enough, it is actually a scene that I kind of like because it's like I think, of course, I think what the movie was trying to do was trying to be like, look, Zach's human too. He has fears. He has issues. And I was just kind of like, I fell for that trap a bit because it's just interesting that they were trying to make him vulnerable. And I'm like, but at the same time, I'm not sure if that really played out for the rest of the movie, though.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I especially think it's interesting because Zach gets that moment of vulnerability in his, like, hacky sack, impromptu performance art piece in a way that I think actually Lainey doesn't necessarily get that same sort of emotional complexity, which is interesting. Like, she's pretty much just colored as, like, the sad girl whose mom is dead. And then, like, everything else from there is sort of flat. Like, I kept writing down in my notes, like, wow, Katarina Stratford in 10 Things I Hate About You is this character, but, like, so much better in every possible way. But I also wanted to say about the performance art scene, the thing that I thought was interesting about it is that I agree with you. I actually think that Zach's piece ends up being, like, super compelling and really interesting, which makes me want to stand up for the fact that, like, the performance art that Lainey does with that weird, like, troupe of people, I just want to stand up as a person who teaches performance art and is a scholar of performance art and the history of performance, that performance art is really cool, you guys, and it is not all terrible, and I promise it has a good sense of humor. It is not all, like, weird monologues about space and face paint, I promise. Follow up with me after class.
I do think, though, this also does have to pertain to the time era of this being released, where it's like, again, I feel like in the 90s, what was clearly in for actors are, like, people like Freddie Prinze Jr., Paul Walker, Gabrielle Union, like, all these, honestly, this whole cast of people in this movie was like quintessential Hollywood, where it's like, it was a different vibe, where it's very much more teeny bopper, and not, if I'm going to be just very candid here, it's not really about, like, the content. It was just about, like, putting out movies that seemed kind of relatable, but it wasn't about, like, making art. So I feel like that's also what was happening, where it's like, it was a very, I think, performance art is very misunderstood in the 90s of, like, what it can actually be.
That's true. I mean, it's such an important way to put it, the way you've said, that these movies were not about the content. They were about relatability and, you know, connecting with the youth, as we said earlier, and getting their sweet, sweet popcorn money.
Exactly. Like, just trying to get teens into the movie theaters. I do like that you're, like, trying to be like, look, performance art isn't just this. It's not this.
It is. It's cool, you guys.
It is. I agree. It is. And I do think times have changed a lot, where it's like, honestly, where I think people are more open to experiencing different types of things. And so I do think, though, the 90s was just a time where, like, it was MTV, and I was going to see these, like, 90s rom-com movies in the theaters.
But so the thing I find interesting about movies like this, then, is that even though they're not trying to say anything about culture or life or, you know, the meaning of everything, they do end up imparting these, like, weird little bits of social wisdom. So I feel like the question I have for you, Ramya, is, one, what do teens who see this movie, I mean, what do you think that they walk away with thinking about love and themselves and dating? And then also, what is she that she is all that? She is all what?
She is all what? Oh my god, what a question. I, like, was not prepared for that one. Because, again, I look back at the 90s, and I look back at, there was definitely, again, like, if you're looking at other shows, this is the only one that's coming to my mind right now, but, like, Saved by the Bell and stuff, there was this quintessential version of what being, like, the it girl was. I just keep on coming back to this idea of the it girl because it's like, this was just always painted where it's like, oh, that's a girl you always want to try to be like, or oh, that's like what you should try to strive for. And so, again, I do love this movie, and I have watched this movie so many times in my whole life. But I do think, unfortunately, now when I look back at it, I feel like when it was released, it's like kind of giving this notion that like you kind of need to change in order for people to see you. And I think that's a hard message for me to think about because it's like, yes, there's one side of like you should open up so people get to know the real you, but also then there's this other side of it where it's like, no, but like, why do you have to force yourself to go like to go a certain way in order for people to get you? Like, why can't they just try to get to know you as you are? Like, you know, I'm where I will say like it's just hard because as again, when Kiss Me plays, when Lainey Boggs walks down those stairs, it's like, of course, like such a like pivotal scene in like movie history, but it's also a little problematic because again, it's like, oh, she just got seen because her hair was cut, she's wearing a cute dress, she's wearing heels, and she doesn't have glasses on. So it's just one of those things where it's like, if I had watched it and I was like a teen back then, like during the 90s, I feel like I would have left being like, oh, like I can't get noticed unless I like change my look, and then guys will get to know the real me after I change my look.
Yeah, I think that's so important for this movie to think about and to not understate how huge that scene where she's walking down the stairs is in the minds of girls like us who were, you know, really young when this movie came out, but it became this like iconic scene. And to have Kiss Me play over it, it does like play in your mind of like, oh, well, you know, if I get the right haircut, if I get the right dress, if I do my makeup the right way, if I have somebody, you know, help me fit into this mold, then, you know, that song will play and he will want to kiss me, or they will want to kiss me, or this person will want to kiss me. But only then, right? The music doesn't start playing until her, you know, strappy sandal hits that first step.
I will say there was a word that I couldn't think of, and you said it, mold. It's like that's also another concept that comes to mind when I feel like that could be taken away from this movie, is that sometimes you might have to fit a mold in order for life to work out for you a bit, is also what I sometimes could get from the messaging of the movie. I don't think that's what they're trying to say by the end, because by the end I think they do say like you should go on the path that you want to go on and just fit your own mold. But I do think throughout the movie you're kind of thinking like you have to fit a certain mold in order to be like accepted.
You're right, and this movie invests a lot, like you said, in the stereotypes, even though it's trying to tell us that in the end, like, you should go on your own path. It's still saying though that those stereotypes are real and that they're something that is achievable if you want it. You know, you can be the popular girl if you want it. You can be the straight A soccer star Ivy League boy if you want it. You can choose not to do that, but then you're just like deviating. So this movie does like, yeah, it kind of perpetuates that even as it's trying to say that you don't have to do it.
Yeah, because I think by the end, they're trying to put out this good message of like, no, like you should still stand true by who you are. And I feel like that's what they try to do with Zach, with like talking to his dad about college. And that's what they kind of do with Lainey, where it's like, oh, like she didn't sleep with Dean Sampson Jr. and she looked out for herself and she's going to art school. But I feel like now, again, for this time where we are at now, I feel like we probably can pick a stronger ending for a movie like this now. But I think back then in the 90s, that was like quintessential way to end a movie. But I also want to answer your other question about what is that for She's All That? Like, what is
it? What is she all of? What is it?
She's all that. I feel like, I guess I'll go with this answer because I feel like, again, I do like the character of Lainey overall. And I feel like the reason, and again, in that rap, that's how they end it. They end it with, she's all that. And I'm like, okay, I see, trying to bring it back to the movie, like the movie title. I appreciate that effort. I would say She's All That probably means like, and again, maybe this is also contrived of the fact that I've been doing meditation a lot nowadays. She's All That just means that she has everything that she needs within her.
I like that, Ramya. I think that's a really good note for us to end on. The all that she is just herself. Even if the movie thinks that that's not enough. All right, well, the time has come. The time has come for us to move on, to wrap these things up as we do. Just like every good rom-com, our show too has a format and a set pattern that we have to follow. We don't have a school dance, but we do have our anecdotes. But before we get to that, let's have a little aside. We really want to shout out to all of our patrons on Patreon who keep the show going and will give us the space to do it every week through these weird quarantine times. And those patrons are Bob, Esther, Emily, Robert, Sean, and our newest patron, Tim. Oh my God, welcome, Tim. Thank you for coming aboard. We literally couldn't do the show without you. Thank you so much. Okay, Ramya, it's time. What is your antidote for She's All That?
Okay, so my antidote, and I thought very hard on this because I was just trying to think what the story of like Lainey and Zach. So my antidote is Netflix's The Half of It. It just came out, I believe, a week or so ago, or a week or two ago. It's a beautiful story. Basically, again, the trailer is so amazing in explaining this. It's not your typical love story where the lead girl is an Asian girl and she is basically helping this guy land with another girl, but the leading girl is actually realizing that she likes girls and she also likes same said girl. But again, like I'm saying this, but it's not about that love story. The love story is actually about the leading girl helping this guy. It's about their friendship. And I feel like it's a good antidote because it's not, no one's changing in this film. No one's feeling like they have to change. And I just love that the lead girl sticks to who she is throughout the whole movie. She's sassy, she's cool, and she just like is very unapologetically her. And I just never see her try to stray away from who she is. And I just kind of love that about her. And so I just feel like it's such a good movie. It really is such a well done movie, and I like highly recommend it. The writer and director, I'm just gonna look up the name very quickly. Give me a second. She wrote and directed the movie Alice Wu, and she just does such a great job. Her writing is so good in this movie, and again, I feel like, the reason why I would say this is an antidote is because in the 90s there was a very formulaic way to do teen movies. And now it's like there's a little bit more play with it and where you could take it to comedy or you can even take it to more drama. And I feel like Alice Wu just like lands the perfect like meld of dramedy in this movie. The Half of It.
Great. My recommendation, my antidote for She's All That, is actually a series of books that was first published in the same year in 1999, keeping a theme going. It is a series of books that is in part about a deliciously awkward British girl who gets with not one, but two, and maybe even more super hot guys, despite it. Or perhaps, I would argue, because of it. And that series is known as the Confessions of Georgia Nicholson series, written by Louise Renison. The first book, Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, was made into a film a few years ago. Don't watch it, just read the book. And then the second has the U.S. title, On the Bright Side, I'm Now the Girlfriend of a Sex God, which is probably my favorite book title of all time. The books are delicious. They're super fun. They let Georgia be strange and awkward and explore her own sort of sexuality and becoming as an adult through her teen years. And it is just delightful fun, super funny. And I appreciate that it's a story of a strange girl getting with the objectively hot popular guy where she doesn't have to change. And also it's completely from her perspective. So my recommendation is the Confessions of Georgia Nicholson series by Louise Renison. Well, Ramya, Thank you for coming on the show. I have not actually seen you physically in life in such a long time. So, like, what a great thing that you were able to come on the show and we could talk like this in these weird times.
Appreciate you guys being open to me talking about She's All That. I love it.
She's all that. Ramya is all that. Da, 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 da. Thank you for listening to the RomCom Killjoys podcast. If you liked this episode, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at RomCom Killjoys. And if you'd like to support us further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/romcomkilljoys to gain access to exclusive bonus content. Our theme song is Lady Slut Hitchhike Love by the band A Giant Dog. And the song you're listening to now is a cover of one of my favorites, Baby Love, by Colin Langanis. Remember, Killjoys, don't let anyone kill your joy. Not a rom-com, not me, not anyone. See you next time.